Hello, Salim, and hello to our wonderful audience members. This is a talk back about MOSS AGATE, which is featured in the 25th edition of the AFF Arab Film Festival. You will be able to catch Salim's film in person and online in San Francisco and on Eventive until November 28th. Salim, welcome to the AFF. We wish we could have you here in person, but I'm so glad that we're able to be in conversation about your film today.
Hello, Beshoy. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I know I haven't crossed the Atlantic yet, but with the online edition, at least online hybrid edition, at least I could be here virtually.
Yes, and inshallah in person soon. Uh,
Inshallah.
Salim Mourad was born in Beirut, and he did both his bachelor's and master's degrees in directing and film research at the Université Saint-Joseph in Beirut, where he also taught cinema and directing for many years. Salim, I think you've developed such a unique artistic approach in a series of autofictions where you blend both documentary and narrative approaches, along with family history, and your sort of painterly eye for constructing moving and still images. So I'm excited to talk to you about this. Your 2016 feature, This Little Father Obsession, opened at Vision du Réel in 2016, and Agatmos premiered this year at Rotterdam. And I think we're bringing it to the US for the first time, which is exciting. This is the final film in a trilogy of body portraits, which I realize this trilogy may go on, something we might get to later in the conversation. But in our conversation, I described the film as a meditation on pathology, sickness, and health, which is obviously all the more resonant and relevant these days. So I'm excited to begin this conversation, and I guess the first question I had for you was about sort of how you see the film, and how you approached this project, um, in both a documentary and a fictional sense. What is it that you're documenting, and what is it that you think you're remaking in Agatmos?
Yeah, I'll start anywhere. We'll see where we get. So, as you said, Agatmos is the third installment of a trilogy for now. And the first two films were shorter films and more experimental films, Linceul in 2017 and Cortex in 2018. The first one is 35 minutes long, the second is 40. The first one was an experiment. We were many actors and actresses in a house. We don't go out of this house. And for many weekends during the spring of 2014, we wanted to film ourselves nude in a house. It was an experience that I desired, but also other actors and actresses desired that as well. So we filmed. We did not know if it would lead to a film or not. And then 2 years afterwards, I finally found an editor that became like a rock partner with me, Sandra Fette, and we edited the film. And when we watched it all together with cast and crew, we liked it, and we decided to continue. That was 2017, and we met again, but then not all of them came back. There were problems. People argued with each other. Some people did not want to. So the second one was more hermetic, darker, and also um, I wanted to archive and film those bodies 3 years afterwards. But already it was not as much documentary or an experiment only as the first one, since we came with things on our minds. For example, one of the actors had his dad dying during the shooting of the film. I had passed through a traumatic experience. We brought these and used the fact that we were nude in a house in order to talk about other stuff,
mm,
to talk about some pains we're passing through. It was more of an expressionistic, if we can say, or expressionist project.
mm,
So comes 2019, and I think many filmmakers have this fantasy of a trilogy. I said, why not do the third? And then I started a conversation more in depth with one of the actresses, Tamara, and we sent emails to each other over the course of a year of our what do we want to do now, and what are the things that are on our mind for this third project. But at some point, almost nobody wanted to be part of the third project, and I found myself alone
mm,
during that summer of 2019. So I told the director of photography, Karim, who filmed the three films, even if it's just you and me, we're gonna shoot something. So that's where the idea of putting myself more in the film came in. I was not as much present in the first two. I only appear in the first and once, or and have one scene, important scene in the second. But in the third one, I decided, since it's just me, let's assume narcissism to the maximum, And I put myself. I started writing about this character that is me, somehow going to all those doctors, because I did have a norchidectomy in 2018, and at some point, when I got the news, I feared that that's it, I'm gonna die now. And uh, and uh, I also had this experience of going to the dentist and telling me there's a white spot that you have to, don't think of it, but we have to follow. And I
mm,
want to salute the soul of this dentist who died in the explosion of August 4th in 2020. So, yeah. And it's very weird that the first scene of Agat Mous, where I appear in the dermatologist clinic, is the exact place where I was when the blast happened. So
wow.
I feel there are some stuff happening in the unconscious, realm. But anyway, and the third thing was receiving a hate message from a guy on Grinder, because it did not work between us, and he wanted to tell me that don't think you're too young, your shoulder is already, I had shared with him that I have a calcification in the shoulder. So he started
Mm,
belittling me, my body, and my worth, etc. So this inspired the date that I have in the beginning of the film.
right.
And all of these together showed me um, that the historical Salim, the ego, if you want, the person that this character is at that time in the film, must die.
Mm,
I don't know who said this injunction, but something must end for something else to begin.
mm,
So that's how I got the impulse for the film. For me, those first 10 minutes are an impulse, um, as if I want to get it over with. A part of me, or an aspect that is struggling, so that we see what comes next. I had this feeling that came when I started writing and decided to make the film anyways. Suddenly, lots of people came back and wanted to be part of the film. And actually, it's the film where there's the most actors and actresses uh, and uh, and people in it. Especially that I decided, since it's the third part of the trilogy, that it's dialectic and logical that clothes come back.
mm,
So after two films without any piece of tissue, any piece of clothing, in the third one, people who want to be naked can be naked, and people who want to put their clothes back can put them back. So since the choice was there in a diplomatic, democratic way, so everybody found their part. And yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the background of the third. So we shot in August and July 2019. Then uh, then the revolution happened in Lebanon, and since then we've been on a roller coaster of events in
Right.
Beirut. So I'm happy this film was shot before that.
Right.
And I noticed that one scene was missing for the arc of Salim 2, the Resurrected, which is the Reiki scene. And in November, I went to my friend Reiki healer Frankie and filmed this scene where I go visit him and and I cry sitting next to him. At least the character, yeah, cries. And we edited it during the first COVID lockdown, and we were on during the sound process when the explosion happened. So what I kept from that is a very huge sound that I put at the end of the credits, at the end
Mm,
of the film. Yeah,
mm.
no spoilers.
No spoilers, right. Um, thank you
I
for that.
forgot what was the question, but
The question was a bit about what you were documenting, and what you were remaking from the
yeah.
film. And so what
So
I'm
so
hearing.
I am documenting us as a community 5 to 6 years after the community started. We all felt, those 3, 4, 5, 6 people that we were, that something unites us, since we were nude in the same house on many weekends back in 2014, as if we were a protected community in a world that's changing. There was ISIS being born at the time, and there was fear in the air. We didn't know if they were gonna cross the borders to Lebanon. The army was fighting them off. So
Mm,
us doing a nudist film in a house in Beirut felt like we were really in a bubble. So
right,
this community, what happened to it 6 years later? And suddenly it became a reflection on Lebanon itself: who
right,
stays, who leaves, who wants to go live in the countryside and try to live in an alternative way, because we can't live in Beirut anymore, and the capitalistic system has started to die in Lebanon. So others were gonna leave the country, go to Europe, and try to hang on to a certain lifestyle that maybe is still existent elsewhere, but
mm,
not in Lebanon. And others stay in Lebanon and wait for their parents to die, as the character states in the beginning. Wait
mm,
for death. Anyway, so this allegory of our small community being nude, not nude, became a sort of documenting uh, zeitgeist of the general feeling, the vibe in my
right,
country at the time. And since the collapse of everything, it makes more sense even now.
right,
Um, so that is what I documented. I documented also our bodies, of course,
right,
and I recreated. I'm a believer in rebirth, and a believer in you know second chances, and my character in the film has a sort of rebirth of sorts. I wouldn't be able to describe it exactly, what are the parameters of it, but there is something that should end for something else to begin. That was a strong intuition, and with the tools I had at the time, I tried to reconstruct that.
right. Thank you for that. I'm struck both by how the film is a departure from the first two, in that you leave the the bounded space of the house, um, and the film does sort of traverse different parts of Beirut, but also different parts of Lebanon. I
Yes, yes. I said, since we're out of the room now, since we gave up on being all nude, I want to conquest the whole country. Conquer.
there, there's and you do so by allowing us to follow different characters who are part of the initial project. Um,
Some of them, not all of them. Yeah.
some of them, not all of them. I I'm wondering. the extent to which you see these as part of the bigger narrative of your character and your character's rebirth in the film, and whether the sort of subplots we see with the other characters, you know, there's a couple going to counseling, there's the jeweler in the countryside. Where do you see their arcs fitting into this sort of frame of rebirth and change?
The jeweler and the lady friend in the film are pillars of the trilogy,
Right.
along with Serge, who we see in the beginning as a DJ behind in those lights at the beginning and at the end, but he's not so present in this third film. So each of them represents something. So the jeweler, for example, is still the same. Even the characters, even François, who goes to film him, tries to a bit harass him about it. It is as if he's not even aware that he did not change. He's still nude, but he doesn't notice that something is different. And
Right.
they spend 10 minutes listening to him talking about jewels and stones while they're there for only one question that Tamara finally has the courage to ask at the end. And she says, "Do you mind, or are you mad at me because I put my clothes back on?" That's
Mhm.
all she wants to know, but we don't get the answer of him.
Mhm.
So Tamara left the community. She decides. I'm talking about the character, of course. She
Right.
decides to return to a regular lifestyle, fall in love, live the little sweetnesses that life can give us. And she remembers the moments lived before with a sort of um, unattainability feeling. And she starts telling this to François, who's a newcomer, a new guy. He's a friend and a colleague, and I always felt like I wanted to film his face, and I told him so. So finally, I found a way to find a role for him in the film, and I really like that shot in the exposition center or the museum where he's talking about his work and talking about the round frame. So yeah, Tamara loses herself in a story that the narrator qualifies as useless at some point towards the end. It was like a waste of time, as if the whole story of her with Francois was a waste of time
Mhm.
before she comes back to something more important towards the end. Whatever it
What
is.
it is, we can't exactly say.
Yeah.
Just a small question to clarify, was the round frame something that you developed in conversation with the photographer, with Francois's character? Or was it
No, I went to an exposition in Beirut, exhibition. Sorry, I don't know what do we say when I'm
exposition,
translating from
exhibition?
French. Yeah.
Yeah.
So an exhibition by François Sargologo that I reference and
Mhm.
in the film itself, and he worked on round frames that were not only photographies, they were old photographies, but worked on zinc, donc on metal.
Mhm.
He cooked photographies on zinc, and that gave some uh, tremendously beautiful work that I was astonished to see. I wanted to buy them all, but I can't afford one. So, so this round frame really spoke to me, and it had, in the history of art, such a sacred feeling to it. This circle shape, many traditions. Uh, think God has a circular shape or something like that. It's important in esoteric terms. So I felt like if François Sorgologo did it in paintings or plastic art, why not try it in cinema? But a part of me also wanted to find a door for this inside the film. And then there was this Francois character who takes photographs and displays them in circular shape. And at some point, we enter inside one of his photographs, and we stay there. The whole film stays there.
Right. The film stays there, and it's you being photographed in one of
Yeah,
the photographs, right?
yeah.
So
He comes to Salim's the character Salim's funeral, and he takes pictures because he had some weird contract with him, where my character gives him full access to him, whether dead or alive. We see this shot at the attorney at the
I and I think, and we see the shot with the attorney and the conversation after the fact. The rights to the image are being negotiated, right?
yeah.
What I think is really interesting is that you're embedding this photographer into your process as a documentary filmmaker, while your character or images of your body are also embedded in this photographer's own visual practice.
Right, it's amazing.
So you're each other's muses.
Yes, somehow, yeah. I was inspired, to tell you the truth, while making this film. I felt all those nice ideas kept on coming. And I have a sort of um, phobia of contracts. I dislike contracts. I dislike having a paper on which I should sign my name. There's a superstitious
Happens to
dis-
you every time the terms of and conditions for your phone or your email change.
yeah. Imagine every day we must sign endless stuff. So I took it to an extreme where, for some reason, you signed all the rights of your image, dead or alive, to somebody. We don't even know why. Maybe because he liked him. So this guy uses this right and comes shamelessly and takes photographs of him, displays them.
Right.
He suddenly, it seems like he's an evil character. he's just uh, he's just an unethical photographer, but that's at the same time sexy.
Well, I also had a question about that character, because when François and Tamara are interviewing the jeweler, when they're interviewing Ellie, it's this photographer, the one who owns the rights to your image, dead or alive. It's this photographer who is trying to be more reserved or polite during the interview, and Tamara just wants to ask the questions. Could you?
No, it's the opposite.
Maybe I should ask this again. It's
Yeah, he wants to ask the question, and she tells him, "Be ethical, be calm. Don't treat him like an animal in a zoo. You have to feel with people." And he pushes her. Why did we come here then? If it's not to ask him what we came to ask, and she tells him, "I'm not ready. I don't feel like I can ask this question." So no, it's the opposite.
right. Okay, let me ask this again then. Sorry, I misunderstood. So there's so I precisely wanted to ask you about Francois's character and the dynamics between Francois, Tamara, and Ellie in that interview. Because I think there's a lot going on, and I'm I'm both curious about how those characters are negotiating representation differently, and where when the stone, when agatmos becomes the title, the symbol, the physical object that you want to anchor the film in.
Was that a question? Mm. Uh, so Tamara is a person um, that knew Salim closely, and then she meets this guy who's new to the trilogy, and we kind of dislike him, but at the same time we feel as spectators that we could forgive him because he's light. I mean, he can do things that are not okay, but he's not heavy. He's maybe what we call uh, mm, uh, mm, we're not in the good evil dynamics yet. He's not seeing his own shadow yet. So these both these two people go to meet Eli. It's like a pilgrimage. He really wants to see this guy who maybe became a sort of a myth, living alone far away from Beirut and still living nude as if nothing changed. And Tamara decides to take him, and this takes the form of an interview. But the real question, the real objective of their coming to see him uh, is a guilt that's working Tamara, which is, do you mind that after a common experience, I chose a path and you chose another? That's what's working her. And François pushes her to ask uh, this question in a reportage, blunt way. If it bleeds, it leads, you know. And she doesn't feel it yet. So this is when, because they're taking their time and she's not like we say, burning the question or asking it right away, but taking the time, and the scene gets longer and longer, that Eli starts talking about this special stone, the MOSS Agate. There's something there that I'm discovering as I'm speaking with you now, that I also read yesterday in a book by Marie-Louise von Franz. She was a collaborator with Jung, Carl Jung. And she says that when you're in front of some sort of impossible choice, you cannot decide neither A nor B. Just stay in the suspension, stay in the crucifixion, stay there until a third item appears. Don't rush. Don't go for A just because the tension has become unbearable. Don't rush for B because the tension has become unbearable. Wait. And suddenly now I see the scene through this lens. There is a third item that appears, which is the film itself, the title of the film itself, that is round like the film, like the shape of the film as well, and that is also carrying a sort of illusion, because it looks like a it looks like it's vegetal, yeah, uh, but actually it's mineral. So there's something you see, but it's not exactly what you're seeing. It's like it's multi-layered. This the stone. Its beauty is in its illusion, in the impression that it gives you, as if there's a forest inside, like the forest that is inside the film itself, and like cinema itself.
And it's like the forest that Shadia tells us we have to go explore.
Nice, nice. See.
Right? I those were some of my favorite parts of the film. They were the conversations that I felt like your voiceover was having with the recordings from Shadia on the radio. Um, and in some ways I read it as your voiceover sort of picking up where Shadia left off. Um, I there's one particular quote when Shadia tells us in El Hayah Gheba, life is a forest, and we have to
Flow it,
plow it. We have to
flow
plow it
it to
in order to
understand it. Yeah.
understand it. Um, can you talk more about the conversations that
Yeah, yeah,
Shadia
I'd like to talk
invites
about
us
that.
to have?
Shadia's character is played by leading Lebanese actress Carol Aboud. Carol we collaborated together on 4 short and medium length films where she acted with me. And then she produced this Little Father Obsession. She also produced Room for a Man by Anthony Shidia. She was very interested in creative um, alternative queer documentaries. And in the Little Father Obsession, she appears in it, and we have live voiceover inside the film. So when I thought of her presence in my films for this film, there was this role of this Shadia radio presenter woman that also appears in a previous film of mine, one of the four I mentioned, where we see Shadia, we see her in the radio station, and then at the end, she has some sort of revelation and she leaves the radio station. We don't really know what happened to her. So I picked that up, and in Agathe Mousse, she's a voice now. And in fact, I thought that at some point we would see her, but effectively, she remains a voice. And I asked her once to come to my house and asked her many questions, and we recorded the answers. But I specifically asked her not to answer to the question like she does in the film. So I would maybe ask a political question, she would answer something related to trees or vegetables, or I would ask a romantic question, she would answer something about a woman who killed somebody. So this dynamic really means to me because it creates a space for the spectator or the one listening. We don't pretend like some radio presenters or TV in general does, that somebody has the answer for you like that right away. There's an abyss or a sort of discontinuity between the question and the answer, but weirdly it appears that sometimes it resonates with what Tamara is passing through, and she feels that the answer would be hidden, like some sort of esoteric secret teaching at Shadia. They go there, but she never comes. They wait and wait and wait. But
I'm
if you,
I'm glad your interview technique is not like it's not a Shadia strategy.
yes,
Asking you
I
about the
should do
film and
that.
you reply about Badunas, it would be.
I I'm being such a classical guy right now answering these questions. No,
I mean,
and if you wait till the end of the film, actually, we see Shadia for one shot that is at the end. So,
right.
yeah,
Uh, and in a previous conversation, you talk about how the film This Little Father Obsession is sort of like your and Carol Aboud's brainchild, and also child.
true. I said that.
Um, yeah. In this film, there is an ending in which there's rebirth and there's birth, and I'm sort of interested um, in this sort of mythic ending. It looks like you've taken us to the Garden of Eden at the end of the film.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
I'm
I
interested.
see it as Proserpina coming down uh, from from the center of the earth to bring spring with her, and I don't do something. Uncover what the two characters put inside the earth and that we
Mm,
never see. There's something mythical, yes, about this last shot. And actually, when um, when Carol took her clothes off a few seconds before we press play record, and then we pressed the record, a big wind came that you see inside the film. There's the trees moving and her hair twirling, and as soon as 10 seconds later we pressed stop, the wind calmed down.
mm.
So for me it was the most emotional and important and beautiful shot of the film for me. And what I can say is that as the Little Father Obsession is the brainchild of me and Carol, this film, Agat Moose, even though it's produced solely by me, is somehow uh, a heart child of me and Tamara, the
Mm.
actress in the film. We thought of it together. She acted in it, and we treat it as our baby. And it's very weird that many people, and it crossed my mind unconsciously. I did not notice that uh, until the film was over. Think that it's Tamara at the end.
I thought it was Tamara at the end as
Yeah.
well. Because
So
we don't see Carol's face at the end.
exactly. But I was not aware of that. And suddenly, for me, it's like a very important juxtaposition of the two ladies that I did two different films with. At the end of Agat Mous, it seems like the voice of one makes us feel almost that her body is the other person's body. It's
Right.
but it maybe it concerns only me.
I mean, it's there's always, hidden poetry or hidden meaning that we embed into the work that we create.
Yes, and this film I present it as a poem. I wanted it that way, and before we shoot it, I told the director of photography and Tamara, I want a film that's 1 hour long
Hmm.
that talks about everything. A long poem that is kaleidoscopic, where there's life, birth, rebirth, death, love, sex, sickness, queerness, colors, round frames, circular frames, jewelry. I want a film about life, an ode to existence. And actually, I'm happy that it somehow turned out to be what I intended. It just was 8 minutes longer.
You're not missing the mark by much there.
Yeah.
Um, and the juxtaposition between the beginning, which stresses extinction. There's this beautiful monologue at the beginning where you're narrating a series of species that no longer populate this earth, and the end, which stresses rebirth. It gives the film a kind of symmetry that does make it encompassing and kaleidoscopic in the ways that you describe.
Yeah. I actually wrote this monologue for the death scene, and
Mhm.
I actually read it all during the scene, but I only left 20 seconds of it in the film. I didn't need more. But when I was writing the names of those animals and I a bit saw what they looked like, I teared up. I felt like we really are losing so much beauty by the way civilization is trying to perpetuate itself and enlarge its richness and treat the earth. There was something I felt like it was almost shamanic. I felt those dead species mm, are asking to be heard and entering a bit through the film. And if you noticed on the scene where my character dies, there's the names of all the species that are extinct,
Right.
and I added an extra one at the end. Did you notice?
I didn't read all of it.
Yeah, the last one. It
It
should.
flashes on the screen, and then it.
Usually we read the first and the last one. I wrote um, le Selimier Beiroutin,
Mm,
the Beirutan Selimer, so, as if it was an extra species that is extinct.
right, right. That's very clever because you intertwine your reflection on your own health, um, and the reflection on the
Now I would say something more after the film is done and having it start where the blast happened and end with the sound of the blast, and especially that if I were in my house that was destroyed and I spent 10 months fixing it, If I were in it and not at the dermatologist, I probably would have died. I felt that the blast of Beirut was somehow a rebirth for me,
Mm,
and I think uh, an aspect of me, the Beiroutian Selimier, uh, has like millions and thousands of other Beirut citizens since the blast is extinct.
mm.
We have 1 million who left the city since last year, and there's something that is definitely something that definitely died.
Right.
So I see this almost as a reflection of what was about to happen, and but the good news is that something dies for something to be born again. And after the blast, I had an experience with shamanic healers, and I actually started something, a path in my life that I wouldn't have started had the blast not happened.
I mean, I think some of the power of your film is that it takes us through a full grieving process. Um, do you want to tell us a little bit more
The
about?
crazy thing, Bishoy, is that I started living the film after I finished it.
Wow.
We sometimes look at each other, Tamara and me, and we feel like as if now I know what I meant by this. Now I know what I meant by this sentence.
Right.
Now I experienced a death experience like the one the character experiences. Now I felt the bird singing again and the sun rising again, like he does at the middle of the film. It's crazy that to finish a work, an artistic work, and then it starts happening in your life.
Yeah. To have life mimic art instead of art mimic life
Yeah,
is
yeah,
your
yeah.
usual formula.
Maybe so much energy was put in this film that it manifested afterwards,
Mm,
or it caught, like I said, something of the vibes, invisible vibes of the city that were still unseen, but
Do you want
then manifested.
do you want to talk a little bit more about the afterlife of the film and it, where or how you might think about expanding upon it? Uh, uh, or about the afterlife of the film in your own life and how you've begun to live it.
Um, Agatmus was good to me. The Rotterdam selection was like the best news at the end of 2020
Right.
after month of heaviness, and it's not just COVID in Beirut. So it was nice to. I'm really grateful for that. And then I got the chance to sign with a sales agent, and who's taking care of sending the film to festivals like this one that I'm participating with you in. So I feel the film is having its little life outside of me to be able to focus on something else, and the screening that happened in Beirut, there was one unofficial screening. There were around a bit more than 100 people that came, friends, cast, crew, and some other people. It was one of the most beautiful nights of the year for me. People were really deeply affected by the film on big screen. I
Mm,
don't know about other cities, other nationalities, other festivals, but in Beirut, it felt like many people told me it was what they needed. It struck them hard.
mm,
I wouldn't be able to tell why or how, but I felt as if I wasn't just a voice that is unneeded or unheard in the desert. Somebody was listening.
right.
This summer, I was telling you, we met again while there was no uh, oil, no gas, inflation, 6 hours waiting at the gas station. We met with Tamara and we thought of maybe doing a fourth film that can or can not be part of the trilogy. It could be a beginning of something new. And we shot scenes, but it was really difficult. Sometimes actors could not come because they couldn't fill their car with gas, and I would replace an actor with somebody else, and it really got experimental again. And I don't know what this will give, but I'm in Paris now, and I won't start editing this film or shoot again some extra scenes before 2022. So this is an exciting thing for me to look forward to. Let's see what it will be.
Yeah, let's see. And we're excited to be able to celebrate this film. It really does touch upon so much, and I think it's I, it's not surprising to me that it had the effect that you describe, uh, giving people the sort of reflection and and intimacy that they needed at the screening in Beirut. And I really hope that it can do so for our audiences.
I hope that as well. Just some people don't click with it if they expect one theme, but if you don't expect one theme to be about death only, or abortion only, or love only, if you accept to go on a journey and feel different things, follow different people, laugh sometimes, cry at others, this could be really a small soul journey of 68 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've taken us on a journey this afternoon. I apologize for the intermittent fire alarm sound from my building, but I thank you so much for your generous responses.
There will be fire in the next film anyway.
There will be fire in the next. Okay, I'll be prepared for it.
Yeah.
Um, and thank you again for sort of peeling back the layers of your process.
Thank you, Beshoy.
Um, like I said, the film is available as a part of our Queer Lens program and in the AFF, both in person and online until November 28th. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching this sometime in the future, I hope that this conversation has been as joyful and enlightening for you as it has been for me and Salim. Again, take very good care. Thank you for your time this afternoon, this evening in Paris, and hope we get to hear and see more from you again soon.
Hopefully. Thank you, Bishoy, so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.